Hi everyone, it's Carrie, aka Nerdy Girl Crates, and welcome back to my channel. It's Saturday Manga Talk at a very special time with some very special guests. I'd like to introduce Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini, the creators of Kamen America. How are you guys doing today?
We're fantastic. Happy Saturday, everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying this lovely weekend as much as we are today.
And how are you
Yeah,
doing,
what's up?
Mark?
Doing good. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. Thank you for being on.
Yeah, I mean Spy Family. So we don't know enough people that want to talk about manga with us. And normally, whenever we do a show, we end up talking about comics or movies or something else. So it's nice to be able to chat about a manga for a change.
Yeah, and Spy Family just had its first episode premiere today on the anime. I think it's on Crunchyroll, and we were just talking about that. But Spy Family, yeah, that's like probably right now one of my favorite manga outside of Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, and One Piece.
Now, isn't
It's a
Spy
really good
Family the
time. It's a
yeah?
really good time for
Yeah.
getting into this type of stuff because there's just a slew of really good titles out there that I think have, I don't want to say universal appeal, but I think they have a broad range of audiences that they could appeal to. And actually, when it comes to crossing that divide between comic readers who are very hesitant to get into manga versus people who are very adept or are used to reading it, I think that Spy X Family, I think its strength lies in the fact that it's very easily accessible for readers both new and old, and that's why I like it. It's currently the favorite title that I'm reading so far. I got Mark to read it as well, and there's a lot of storytelling notes that we take whenever we're doing our own scripts, and it's based off observations that we've had by reading Spy X Family.
So
And what
correct
do
me
you
if I'm
think?
wrong, but Spy Family is the one that outsold One Piece, right? It was the first manga in like 10 years to dethrone One Piece, or was it Shonen Jump's voting? They actually got outvoted.
If
Am I
I'm not
mistaken in that?
No, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what it was that obviously when it comes to like the weekly rankings for Shonen Jump, One Piece had pretty much been undefeated for a very long time, and then Spy X Family was the usurper, and that's actually how it came onto my radar. Now I don't know anything about One Piece other than the fact that it's insanely popular,
Mhm.
and so when I saw that that was there, I had just been on the Shonen Jump app to actually read something else, which was Bakuman, and to get caught up on One Punch Man. But then I thought, well, heck, it's here. I might as well read it. And then I ended up binge reading the whole thing in under like 2 days.
Yeah, and I mean, so Spy Family, I mean, is such a different genre from One Piece, and so the fact that it was able to outrank One Piece, it's surprising because it's doesn't seem like it's casting a net for the same audience. But then when I was reading Spy Family, because you gave me the volume one Tankobon, so I just like devoured that really quickly because it was so good. It's like you guys were talking about Spy Family. It's such a mishmash of genres. It's almost like there's no one that it wouldn't appeal to, or like everyone can find something that they want in there. I mean, it's got action, it's got a cute kid getting into mischief, it's got a dog, it's got the spy stuff, but then it's also got the slice of life family stuff. It's just got a little bit of everything for everybody.
Yeah, and like Tim was saying, and you were just saying, Mark, it does have something for everybody because there's a lot of nods to like 1950s spy films in this. You've got the dog named Bond. You've got like the whole atmosphere, like the it's almost like a Cold War atmosphere.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
yeah, like
political
Westalia,
intrigue.
and yeah, and it's like East and West Berlin. I think is kind of the
Yeah.
fake setting, but they're called like Westalia and Estonia or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. And it's really interesting because you have this hardcore spy who refuses to have any attachments because his life is about being a spy, and he's tasked with having to put this family together to infiltrate this elite academy so he can get close to a leader of this political extremist party. And he finds himself with a family that might have some much more dangerous secrets than maybe he even has.
It's very disarming because, for example, I actually don't like the spy genre, with the
Right.
exception of Bond movies. But James Bond movies, in my opinion, they're less about spy being a spy thriller and more about Bond. They tend to be
Yeah.
character pieces that revolve around him. And so it was like a hard sell for me. But I think what really sold me on it is not just the fact that they're able to kind of blend a bunch of genres together, but even the title is misleading because it's called Spy Family. yet there's only one spy in the family, and they're not even a real family. They're
Right.
a fake family. For people who don't know the general plot, it's as we've been talking about so far. It's essentially East and West Berlin. There's a Cold War of sorts going on, so there has to be some spy stuff happening. But the only spy is the lead character, the male. His quote unquote wife is an assassin. She's not a spy, she's an assassin. But she's very down to earth. She's very what's the word for it? She's mom material. Like she's
Hmm.
very sweet in her demeanor. But she makes her money by essentially being an assassin. And then you have who I would argue is probably the scene stealer of the show, which is Anya, who is the little girl. She's a telepath. And so you start thinking to yourself, I think after a few missions, you're like, well, this is going to get predictable because Anya is the one who knows everything,
Yes.
whereas the man and the woman have no clue that the other person leads a double life. And so you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith type scenario. We've seen this played out. But then they throw in the dog, and the dog is a clairvoyant. And
Yes.
the girl does not know that the dog is a clairvoyant. So there's that extra twist of a character being thrown into it who is more aware of things going on that the other characters are not. And so it's so well balanced because you want to see how they play off each other as this goes along. And I was having a conversation with Mark earlier this week about how deceptive it is in terms of its storytelling because the central plot is they need to infiltrate this school. But how much progress has actually been made so far with regards to that? You're so preoccupied by the antics of them, like busting up like a dog testing facility, or Anya just trying to make friends at her school, kind of slice of life adventures, or them even going on a cruise. You have this illusion of plot development when no plot has actually transpired. And then Mark pointed out to me that this is not the only time this has happened in anime. The most popular example is, for example, Cowboy Bebop. You can
Mm.
actually cut it apart where it's probably less than 6 episodes that actually have the A plot. Everything else is a tangential adventure.
Yeah. And what I love also about Anya is like I think any normal kid who'd find out they're in this dangerous situation would be scared to death, but she's like thinks this is the greatest thing because her favorite cartoon is about a spy.
Yeah, she has that authentic kid reaction, and in a lot of ways, Anya's so much more authentic as a kid character than you see in most anime. She
Yes.
cries and throws tantrums. She acts like a brat sometimes, but she's not. She isn't a brat. She just occasionally acts like a brat, so she's still likable and lovable. Her big fear and the reason why she just doesn't like spill the beans about what she knows about her family is that she's afraid of her family falling apart. She always has
Mm.
these little kid fantasy scenarios that she imagines these ridiculous outcomes for everything that are just I can't wait to see the anime get to them because they're so cute in the manga where uh it was I was just flipping through it, but her little fantasy, if her mom and her dad find out about the other's secret occupation, it's Lloyd saying like, "You are an assassin. This marriage is over, and I want Anya sent back to the orphanage. Goodbye." And she's like, "Oh no, I can't let that happen."
Yeah. And then you have Lloyd like thinking that this is going to be no sweat until he gets Anya in his house and her being the kid, he's trying to go away to do something secretly and she's attaching herself to him. And he goes as far as his locks her in the apartment.
And he says things that I think are very typical of any parent. I think that, for
Hmm.
example, when you have a baby, obviously you don't know what it's like until it happens and then you get used to it. But imagine if you're just foisted upon with a child who's already of age. And he says it in the anime, and it was a great line, and I forgot about it. He's talking to Frankie, who is, I guess, his confidant, who arranged a lot of stuff for him. And
His
he's like,
cue.
yeah, he's like his cue. And he says, you know what I hate about kids? All they have to do is cry to get what they want. And
Hmm.
I thought about how funny and true that statement is because that is something that children learn. They learn that they can typically get what they want just by doing that until they make it to an age where they realize I can't act like that anymore just to get what it is that I'm searching for. And so there are those moments where I think that if you were to give this like general concept to a Western audience or like to a Disney, there's this tendency for this, what they call the junior knows best principle, which is the idea that no, if we're going to do a kid-centric thing, the kid is always right. They're always going to come out on top, and they know more than their parents. But what I like about the way that Endo has done his story is that she might have extra information because she's a telepath, but she still has a child's intellect, which
Right.
means that she is not all knowing and all intelligent. She ends up getting into mischief, and it has a cost to it. I mean, you see it in the first episode, which is pretty faithful to the first mission of the first book, where she's like, "Oh boy, I'm gonna play with my dad's little like telegraph machine," and uh, and she gets caught. And when she's caught, she's fearful. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I messed up big time, and this was not something that I should have done." And so she realizes that a lot of her decisions have consequences to them. And so she's not an infallible character. And what I've liked so far, up until volume 7 and beyond, if you have the app, is that all the characters are evenly balanced in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. You will find someone in there who you like probably the best, but that's not because the other characters are less intelligent or less strong or less witty or less formidable. I feel like that they all bring something to the table, and anytime they have a scene to themselves, you're just glued onto it. You don't. There's not a part of you that thinks like, yeah, I don't like this character. Let's move on to the kid or to the dog or whoever.
Yes, this is true. And speaking of those characters, you're his wife, who's the assassin, like you're saying. Her personality is completely different of what her job is, and she comes off very like shy at times and a little nervous, and then she's trying so hard to be the perfect wife, and when she's cooking,
I love that
there's
running gag where just Anya will blurt out without any filter, like "Mommy, you're the best, except at cooking, you're terrible."
she goes as far as trying to get somebody to teach her, and that person gets frustrated with trying to teach her how to cook.
Yeah, and
But
then I
Yeah,
forgot that I think the only character I've found so far who I could care less about, but I think that's the point, is her brother.
uh-huh.
Her brother kind of fulfills that trope that happens in a lot of anime of like I don't know, weird sibling relationships where they kind of almost teeter on, I don't want to say incestuous, but it's almost like overbearing.
Mhm.
And you find out that the entire reason she's an assassin is essentially, to her, it's a blue collar job to make sure that she could provide for her family. But in reality, that's not who she is per se as a person. And even then, her brother is essentially the Gestapo. He's not a
Yeah.
good dude. um,
No.
and so they all lead these dual lives, but it's written in such a slice of life way that there's a charm to them. Even when there's action and things going on, you always feel like I don't know how to say it. You feel really comfy at the end of every mission.
yeah, it has that. It has a weird punctuation in the way that the storylines are paced, and that they'll do like a big story, like Yuri, who's Yor's brother, coming over for dinner, and Lloyd having to keep the whole sham going in front of him. That storyline went on for like 4 or 5 missions. That was a bigger one, and then they'll just do a decompressed slice of life chapter where it's the characters. I think it was like Yor went grocery shopping and brought Anya with her, and someone tried to mug her, so Yor beat them up. It's just a really loose, comfy plot, and they'll do a couple of those in a row. And then they'll do a big one like getting the dog. That was a lot of chapters. That was the entire Tankobon was getting Bond the dog.
Mhm.
Um, but that was after like they did a dodgeball episode. It was just like the kids play dodgeball. That's what's happening in this one. Nothing important's going to happen, and it's you don't care. It's just fun because you like the characters and you like seeing how they react to each other.
Yeah, and you kinda love, like, the school atmosphere too with Anya trying her best to get Damien to be her friend, and everything keeps going wrong. Like, even on the first day, she ends up friends with the wrong person, and
Yeah,
Lloyd's just like, "No!"
Oh,
there's
that was a
also that
great one
plot with
too. It's
her friend too,
Yeah.
Becky, yeah.
Becky. Yeah.
But I love that one because that was another like slice of life one where Anya punched Desmond, and the whole point of the whole like that's a huge part of Lloyd's mission is that Anya needs to be friends with Desmond because Desmond's father is a huge influential person within the government that Lloyd needs to get close to. So that's why that's an entire part that's really important. So her getting mad and punching Desmond in the face kind of ruins his whole mission. So Anya's trying to fix that, but she doesn't want to say that she's sorry because Desmond's a jerk. So
Yes.
Lloyd uses his spy abilities, and this is where the actual spy part of Spy Family comes into play, to use like his master of disguise thing to dress up as different faculty members and staff members around the university and leave subliminal messages to Anya to try and get her to apologize. Like he'll serve her an omelet at the cafeteria, and he'll use the ketchup to write "Say you're sorry" on it, or he'll disguise himself as the teacher, and he's giving like a lecture on the value of humility and apologizing. And Anya's like, "This wasn't on the curriculum today."
Yeah, he's kind of become like that in some weird way, the overprotective dad going undercover all the time at the school to make sure she's doing everything like she's supposed to be doing, and it's hilarious.
But
It's
it does something interesting in that sense too, where again, to kind of compare it to Western storytelling, where I think everything is either done by committee or done by with a false sense of what audiences want. We've seen that kind of storytelling before, where it's like the father is in that role of being kind of over dominating, and they follow the kid around, and even the audience thinks it's annoying because they're just like, oh my gosh, come on, like quit it. That's such a, like an okay boomer type moment. But there's a charm in the way that he does it because it is in fitting with his character. He's supposed to be kind of sleuthy and stealthy and being able to do things without being too overt about it. But the irony about it is that it's such an overt thing, like what Mark was saying with the omelet, where it's like, say you're sorry. How much more on the nose can you get with that? But it's the presentation of it that makes it so endearing and cute in the context of what's happening in the story.
Right, and then you have poor Anya's gotta win, what is those, the stars?
the
In
Stella
order to
Stars, yeah.
the Stella stars, and he goes as far as to dress up as a faculty member and go in to check her test, and he comes across somebody else trying to change Desmond's test results, and it's like it's like, "I'm not the only one doing this? What's going on here?"
What's great is that Anya as a character, you wouldn't think she would work. If you just read like her Wikipedia bio, she sounds like, I don't know, like Angelica from Rugrats. She sounds like she should be
Mhm.
really annoying, but the way they execute her works. Like the first time she gets a Stella star, the entire chapter is just about how much she sucks at everything. There's all these different categories in which you can earn a Stella Star at the academy. You can do it in like sports, you can do it in academics, you can do it in public service, these kinds of things. And she tries every single one of them, and she fails. They eventually go and they volunteer at a hospital, and she can't even mop a floor. She's so useless, and Lloyd's just like watching her fail at the most simple tasks. And this would normally be really annoying if you had, that character that can't do anything right, that like just screws everything up. Those kinds of characters are obnoxious in most cases. But Anya, it works because she's like 5 years old. Like of course she's not going to be like a Rhodes Scholar. She's not going to excel. She can read minds, but that rarely helps her in the thing she needs it for. Like when she's trying to take an exam, so she's like, I'll just read the minds of all the other kids in the room and get the answers. And then she just reads everyone's minds. She finds that everybody around her is having trouble with the test too because it's really hard. So it doesn't benefit her in any way. And she's just like, oh no. Like it's that balance of characters. Like you think like maybe Yor is overpowered, right? Because she's such a great fighter, and one of the running gags is that she will like flip a switch and be really ferocious, and she's super strong and she's super agile. Like a character like that, like, oh, is she like, she should be boring, but she has all these like failings. Like she's a really bad cook, so everyone can always like knock her down a peg by making fun of her food. But she drinks too much, so she like they do that gag where Anya will blurt out something that she's not supposed to, and Lloyd will be like, Anya, but then Yor's been drinking and she'll blurt out something she's not supposed to, and it's like, Yor, like that kind of thing, where like she's got these imperfections that are legitimate, and they're what endears her as a character, so she never feels like a prop.
I love those moments when she suddenly kicks into assassin, like when she's saving Anya, and then she remembers, "No, oh, no, oh, I don't know how that happened," and she's calling the cops going, "Yes, I'm just a housewife."
I had forgotten about that. Watching episode 1, so for people in the chat who might not know, episode 1 of Spy X Family just debuted
Mhm.
worldwide this morning. So if you have any streaming service, primarily Crunchyroll, Funimation. I know they're one and the same. You can check it out. But I had forgotten that the apartment that they're living in currently in the series is not the one that he originally bought in the first
No.
mission. They had to change because of a mistake that Anya had made. And even looking at that first episode, there were things that I had completely forgotten about that I thought were, definitely very endearing. I love that one part where it's such a throwaway panel, but I think in terms of comparing the two, I think that the manga actually did it better because it's really quick. But in the manga, there's that scene where Anya has she has her finger on the sidewalk and ants are walking around it, and I don't know why, but in the manga it's really cute because there's like a whole almost like half page I want to say devoted to that, but you can barely see it in the anime because of the way it's colored. It's like in at sunset, so it's like a blink and you miss it type of thing. But looking at the comparison between the two, I actually think that for the first episode, they adapted that manga pretty accurately.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
if
it's
you're gonna,
almost identical. I went back and I read the first mission, and they pretty much did it like 1-to-1 in their adaptation. I think the only thing they left behind that I wish had made it in was at the very end when Lloyd's napping on the couch and Anya like gets in to cuddle with him, and that like frightens him, and he wakes up. In the manga, he like rolls her off the couch, and it's this really comical, super deformed drawing of her, and she's like
yeah,
flying through the air. They cut that out of the anime though.
yeah, and if you watch it, stay through the credits because there's more scenes after the credits. So, and that's the scene Mark's talking about there. But yeah, I love that, and the fact that he's letting his guard down without realizing it, it's kind of like irritating him in that scene. Like, I never fall asleep in front of people.
Yeah. What do you think? Since you so just some background, I think Mark has probably read more manga than I have. I'm fairly new to it as well as to anime, and it's just been a byproduct of just not really reading a lot of American comics nowadays. But since it became so popular, and you have probably have a better pedigree for reading this stuff, what is it that drew you to this particular manga as opposed to anything else?
Well, I always liked kind of like that the BBC type stories with like the spy stuff. Um and this kind of had like that same type of like nostalgia to it with, like I said, the 1950s like spy thriller. Um you have this very charismatic character, but he's put into this situation that doesn't fit the type of life he's had this whole time. And you have this adorable little girl who just wants to be loved because she's been rejected multiple times throughout her life, and she just wants to appeal to him. She goes out of her way to try to do these missions, and you want to root for her. That's something you don't get too much anymore in American comic books. You want a character you could root for, and you feel bad for every time she fails a mission. You look at her like, it's all right, Anya, the next time.
Yeah, the consequences, at least in her mind, are genuine. That
Mhm.
she's just afraid that her family will break up if she fails. So it is a real fear that children have, and it's something that actually has some merit, at least this early on in the story, because Lloyd's still kind of in spy mode, where he's still kind of like a sociopathic jerk who uses people to an end
Mhm.
as part of his occupation. But I mean, we all know essentially that eventually Lloyd's going to become attached to to Yor and to Anya, and they're going to stay together as a family. You kind of know the end game for however long Spy X Family goes, like where it's going to end, that it's going to be ending with them as a happy family. But that doesn't deflate the suspense of the narrative. That doesn't make it a boring read. It's almost like when you watch a superhero movie, you know the good guy's going to win, but it can still be a good movie. Or any movie, really, you know the good guy's going to win, but that doesn't make the movie boring or less suspenseful, even when you know that. And that's how I feel with Spy Family, is that you're just kind of watching now as Lloyd stops being such a sociopath and kind of learns to love his family genuinely instead of as assets.
Yeah, it's enjoying the journey to what you know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of manga I've been seeing recently that have come out that kind of have a very similar storytelling style. And I can't help but think that just kind of like how isekai, I mean, it's like parallel thinking. Like all these people are kind of thinking the same thing at the same time. There's another manga that's on Shonen Jump that's very similar. It's called Sakamoto Days, and it's about
Mhm.
it's about an assassin who basically falls in love, has a family, and just runs a 7-Eleven. That's essentially the plot. And it includes a lot of the same elements. There's a telepath. Obviously, Sakamoto himself is an assassin. There's like a kung fu master in it. But of all of them, I think that there's not that many that are kind of like it, and it's obvious that I think Spy X Family has kind of stood out from the bunch, just because I do think it's a more difficult topic to, or more difficult genre to tackle. I think that, for example, isekai, you're just in another world, so sky is the
Mhm.
limit in terms of whatever you want to put in that world to make it unique. Whereas I think when you have anything that involves intrigue or spies, there has to be a very good storytelling through line to make it interesting for the reader.
Yeah, and that's true because a lot of the times you see a lot of manga follow similar formulas, but this kind of like is different from what you normally get. It's either the over the top, overpowered hero or the as you were saying, the isekais where they go into a different world. This focuses more just kind of like Mark was saying earlier, mixture of different genres.
Yeah, slice of life, big one, and
Mhm.
I like that as well because it's I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older, but mostly as far as anime is concerned, I pretty much just watch nothing but slice of life. But you also have romance too, because there is something that's kind of blossoming there between Lloyd and
Mhm.
Yor, but it's not it's nowhere close. I mean, I think by this time most high school based rom-coms would have made a lot more further progress, but that's okay. It's this idea that it's a very cute relationship that they're in. They're pretend husband and wife, but there's no real intimacy between them. But everything is very platonic and it's very wholesome. Spy X Family, for again people in the chat who might not know, it is a very good introductory manga. So for
Yes.
anyone who has not taken that leap and is wondering like what's a really good entrance point to it, I would say that this is a good place to go. There's nothing I would say is like questionable or objectionable in it. There's hardly any foul language. It's pretty much like PG level violence. It's good
Mhm.
stuff. It's and you'll probably get something. You'll see something in there that you like.
It's well written.
Yes,
Y-
extremely well written.
It's well written. It's really well drawn. So Tatsuya Endo, I was flipping through my manga before, just as like research to remind me of some of the stories before we started, and he's just really good at hitting different tones, and the styles will clash, but that's also kind of what makes it funny. Like he has his style guide for how the characters of Spy X Family are supposed to look, but then he'll go off model in absolutely different directions for some of them. Like, Anya will turn into this weird little like gremlin when she's doing like a funny reaction. She almost looks like like she stepped out of a different manga completely, but it's funny. Whereas like Yor, whenever she's getting angry, she looks like she's something out of like Devilman or a Go Nagai, manga, where she just like she grows fangs and she gnashes her teeth and she's got this darkened brow and she just looks totally different from the way the characters normally appear. And I'm curious how much of that is going to make it into the anime, because a lot of anime adaptations, even when they are very accurate, just by nature of being animation, they look sterile compared to the manga. They can't get all those little details that the manga artist can put in.
Right.
Like there's an anime adaptation of Junji Ito's stuff, and it looked really bad. It was a accurate adaptation of his horror manga, but it didn't have the texture and the line work, so it ended up not landing. It looked too clean, too sterile. So I guess that is one thing that the manga will have over the anime. As good as that first episode was, and as accurate as it was, like that first episode had some amazing adaptation of the action scenes. Like there's a part where uh, Lloyd comes into his apartment and there are two enemy agents inside, and he reacts to disarm them. And the action scene is adapted directly as it was in the manga, but seeing it in motion is actually more impressive. He knocks the first guy out, disarms him, then he maneuvers around the like breakfast table, grabs a chair and smashes it over the other guy, and that's just like 3 panels in the manga, but in the anime, it's an entire fight sequence, and it looked fantastic.
It did. Another thing I like, he also develops a lot of backstory on these characters. I think Lloyd is the only one you don't have a full backstory on yet, at least not where I'm at. But he gives you like reasons why they're like Yuri with her Yor with her reasons for being an assassin. Yuri with why he's the Gestapo. Um and why Anya is so determined to hold on to this family.
Well, I think that for Lloyd, it's also a question of at this point, um, it would be the icing of on the cake if you found out a little bit more about his backstory, because I had completely forgotten, it'd been so long, that they do touch on it a little bit when he has that line where it's like, oh, I remember how in the aftermath of war I was crying and no one could save me, and I want to live in a world where children don't have to cry anymore. It's like, there you go, that's the character. Like, how much more do you need to know about him and where he came from? But like you were saying, it would be interesting, like if they did that and they went back and explored some of that backstory. I would not be opposed to it either. It's just that I think in establishing who he is right now, they did such a good job that is it really something that we need to see? That would just be something, a kind of almost extra detail that would just be the icing on the cake. In a way, it would be like the reverse James Bond, where it's like, okay, well, do you want to know more about James Bond's like teenage life? I'm like, nah, I don't think so. I think we're good. Let's just fast forward to when he's cool. Like, I don't think we need to see
Exactly.
any of that stuff.
But I think that moment also established why he didn't send Anya right away back to the orphanage.
He was going to, though. I forgot about
Yeah.
that line where he gave her a note and was like, if you take this, if she takes this to the police station, they're gonna find a better home for her. But you're right. It's not that he wanted to get rid of her. He was trying to do what he felt was best for her own good and for her overall safety and survival. Until she was the one who made the decision. I don't want to do that. I want to stick with you. Obviously, he did not know that she knew that it was him under the mask, but yeah, that was one of those really interesting character moments between the two of them.
Also, like you were saying earlier about the brother Yuri, what's also interesting is that he's hunting Twilight, but he doesn't know Twilight's married to his sister.
Yeah.
And that whole part where they meet for the first time and you watching Anya listening to both of their thoughts, and she's just going, uh-oh.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think it was Mark who said it. If you look from like a really high angle at the manga so far, what's funny about it, kind of the overarching comedy, is essentially they're all idiots. Like, to us, you're thinking, even without like telepathy or anything, how in the world do you not put two and two together that all of this stuff is happening? And in a way, it's like seeing the forest for the trees, or vice versa, where it's like, nah, they're too kind of focused on their own job that it's not even within the realm of possibility that there's actually something else going on
Right.
in any of that.
It's like even the one moment where Lloyd does get a little suspicious about Yor, and he follows her, and then he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, no, she's just a normal person.
Well, it's like the dinner party scene. It's the one that precedes the proposal. Like one of the guests, like I think throws food or something, and Yor literally does like a split kick to catch the plate. And I was just like, how in the world is this guy not like, what? Like, how in the world are you able to do it? But she comes up with some stupid excuse like, oh, I took like aerobics or something. And to him, it's like, oh, that's a completely logical answer to that.
One of the funniest chapters, I think it was a bonus chapter. It's on the job when Yor's assassinating someone. One of the bodyguards stabs her in the butt, and so she doesn't want them to find out that she's injured. So she has to try and play it cool. But
Yeah.
Lloyd's worried that Yor doesn't actually love him and is going to leave him, and then his entire cover will be blown. So he tries to take her out like a romantic night in the town, but the entire time she's making one of those Yor faces where she's just like got her teeth like gnashing and her face scowling, and so he thinks that she's miserable the whole time, when her inner monologue during is like, this is such a wonderful magical night, but oh my god, it hurts. And she can't, like, she's trying to sit down, but she's like hovering over the chair by like a fraction of a centimeter, so she's not actually sitting, and she's just trying to hold that pose for like 3 hours, and the entire time she just looks like she's hating it. And that's just one of those, it's a slice of life type story. It doesn't move the plot along at all. It's just there for fun. And that is one thing I do love about manga that I'm envious of, is that they can just, if they want to do a chapter about Yor and Lloyd going on a date, or uh, Anya playing dodgeball at school or something, they'll just do it. And no one accuses it of being filler or a waste of time or not moving the plot along. As long as it's funny and entertaining and character driven, then it's not a waste of time.
Actually, so you brought up something just now that had never dawned on me. So you take that scene, for example, like having a night on the town and going on a date. And again, people, please forgive me for making this observation, but we can't help it. We compare a lot of like Western comics to manga storytelling because we're trying to learn. If you were to have that in the case of, let's say, a Western comic book, whether that be like Batman or X-Men or whatever, they would use it as an excuse for melodrama. So a date scene in Western comics would be like, okay, this is gonna be high tension. It's the guy and the girl. Maybe there's like a rocky relationship going on, and we're gonna explore that a little bit. But in the case of this, like perfect example for Spy Family is like, nah, we're gonna use it to entertain you. Like, and we're gonna show you more about the characters and their motivations. And so what you learn from Yor is like, I really like this guy. He's actually like a legitimately good guy, but my gosh, my ass hurts right now because I'm hovering above the chair. So you learn two things simultaneously. You learn, well, three things. You learn that one, she can try and act to feign that she's actually having a good time, even though she sucks at it because he's interpreting her signals completely wrong. But two, you also learn that she genuinely like loves him. And then you actually learn something about him, where it's a naivete, where it's like, he might be the greatest spy, but he's not good enough to see what she's doing. And you leave being highly entertained by these people, by this moment of character growth in a way.
Yeah, and I think another hilarious moment, I think it was in one of the more recent volumes, is when Anya is tasked with an assignment to follow her parents to their day jobs. And Anya is just imagining Yor showing her job as an assassin. And she gets all dressed up as a spy to go with Lloyd to his job as a psychiatrist, and she thinks they're going to go out spying. And he's just looking at her going like, "Why are you dressed like that?"
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm a psychiatrist, like, in my real job. So far, Carrie, in terms of where everything is right now, what's been your favorite, I guess, plot line or story or mission?
This is gonna be an odd choice, but I really kind of like right now the dynamic between Anya and Damien, because she thinks he completely hates her, but ever since she hit him, he started to have a crush on her. And every time they get together, he's like nervous and blushes, and she just goes, "It's that jerk again. He hates me." And then every time she thinks she's got the upper hand on him, like when they're playing cards, and then she realizes she's lost. He's like, "No, that's not how you win." And he just looks at her like, "What?" And like when she's so proud of herself for just passing, she's like, what, 234 on the list?
Yeah.
And he's like number 1. And she's all celebrating that, and he's just looking at her like,
Idiot. Like, what are you happy
like,
about? It's not a good thing.
But that's part of that balance that works so well, is that under normal circumstances, if Damien was nothing but a spoiled brat who was really obnoxious, you would hate him. You would hate whenever he showed up on the page because he'd be annoying. But because
Mhm.
he has that one little like sliver of humanity to him, where he actually does have a like a little thing for Anya, so there are small moments where he's nice to her. Like I
Mhm.
think it was she got her Stella star and she was showing it off in the next chapter at school, and some of the other girls were mocking her and saying like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you must have gotten that one by mistake. A girl like you could never earn one." And Damien actually comes to her defense, but not her defense, Anya's defense. He comes to the defense of the school, saying like, "Oh, do you think that the academy is doesn't know who to give a stars to? Like, why are you even here if you have such low respect for this academy? Like, if they heard you saying that, they'd expel you." And the girls like shut up and they stop making fun of Anya. So it's just a way of him defending her without making it look like he's defending her. It was a really clever way of
Yeah.
keeping that storyline going without blowing it, but maintaining the characterization.
Yeah, and her always trying to find an in with him is hilarious. Like when she goes on about her dog, and he goes, "Well, what did you name the dog?" And she's like, "I don't know."
It's like,
Dog?
dog. He's like, "Oh, you're an idiot," and they all walk away from her, and she
Yeah.
blew it.
What's the name of the headmaster who's in there who teaches their particular class?
Oh, the one who's like
Oh,
always going like so elegant.
yeah. Like when they were auditioning for the school, and he thought, "Oh my God, look at this family! They're one of a kind. They're like
Yeah.
perfect material."
There another thing that happens, and I guess it goes with the whole theme of how the writer is good and is good enough that he counterbalances his characters very well, is that I thought that guy was going to be so insufferable because he's drawn so insufferably. I mean, he has like little tiny beady eyes and this like long nose, long mustache, and you're like, here's a Snidely Whiplash type jerk. It turns out the guy's like an idiot too, and he's like a flamboyant dandy who's all obsessed with like elegance and stuff. But he's the guy who basically lets them in because
Mhm.
he was so impressed with the way that kind of Lloyd stood up for his family that he's like, no, I'm gonna have this person come in. And so the whole time I was thinking this guy's gonna be like the villain, kind of the sub boss. And no, I mean he's just another character that has his own kind of unique quirks to him. But I've liked that so far in the series is that way they do that. They do it in terms of physical humor with the dog. In the
Yeah.
in the recent series, there's a one mission that involves the dog like just clairvoyantly realizing these futures that are going to happen,
Mhm.
and at the end, like he needs a bath, and so like Lloyd gives him a bath. And it turns out he's not a big dog at all. He's really skinny, and he's like, "What the heck is this? Like, how did you transform?"
It's like I love when he looks at Lloyd, and Lloyd is like, "Well, we're gonna get you into like guard dog training school and everything," and the dog's like, "What? No."
He's like, "Don't you know what I've been through? I hate that life." As far
Yeah.
as storylines, that's actually my favorite one is the dog storyline. I don't want to spoil it for people, but I don't know. It's the right combination of kind of a dog story, a little bit of action in there, and there's kind of like that bittersweet thing where you find out like his backstory, and of course you feel bad if you like animals. You're like, oh, I can't believe that poor dog like had to go through all of that. But I like it whenever the dog is paired up with either Lloyd or with Anya, you know you're gonna have a good time.
I do like also the bonus one where he gets jealous of the penguin that
Oh
Lloyd
yeah.
got for.
I was looking at some of the merchandise that's come out already, and obviously they're kind of doing a smart thing by having it be mostly the Anya stuff because
Mhm.
she's a cute kid. But I thought they made a tactical mistake when they paired one of the figures up with her stuffed toy from from her first scene in the orphanage. I thought they should have given her the penguin.
Mhm.
Yeah, instead she has that like weird like lion chimera thing as was the toy she had at the beginning. Yeah.
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 Well, the part
Yeah.
where it's in the dog arc, but it's when they were deciding on what dog to get, and so the story hasn't really gotten underway yet. Anya's reading her parents' minds, and Lloyd's like, maybe we should get a big dog that can protect Anya. And Anya's like visualizing this like pit bull, like, but then he's like, but then it could maul her. And she just like sees herself like getting mauled and like chewed up by the big dog. And so she's like horrified. Then she looks at Yor, and Yor's like, perhaps we could get a small dog, but those have like very vicious tempers. And she's imagining like this Pomeranian with a knife in its mouth slitting her throat. Just so ridiculous. It's great.
I just love her facial expressions when she's reading their minds. Just like her eyes are popping out of her head, like, "What? No, no."
Yeah, and it's one of
But
those really great things where again it goes back to the idea that she might be a telepath, but she has a child's intellect and a child's imagination. So that's what she sees in her head because it's an overactive imagination that's not informed by experience or reason. So that's kind of the charm of her character is that it's like, nah, it's in a lot of Western media, they always depict children as childish as opposed to
Mhm.
childlike. And they do a really good job of making sure that she's childlike in terms of her mannerisms and her reactions and stuff like that. And like what Mark was saying, most of the time her telepathy just backfires on her anyway.
I love when she gets lost in her thoughts and forgets that she's with people, like when she went to work with Lloyd and she's sitting there imagining doing all this spy work and she gets that look on her face and he's looking at her like, "Why do you have that look on your face?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Show me your office."
Yeah, and that's the power of the artist too. The artist does a really good job in drawing a multitude of facial expressions on her. Probably one of the most versatile um, variety of facial expressions I've seen for any given character. Like you always know kind of what's on her head, in her mind. And he does something like this, I think, not necessarily in the later volumes, but definitely towards the end of volume 1 of the collected Tankobon. But whenever she's doing something really stupid and Lloyd is seeing it through his vision, she's always depicted as her eyes like being googly, like one eye is looking one way, one eye is looking the other. And it's so silly in terms of how it's depicted. That's one of those things that, as Mark was saying, I can't wait to see how they show it in the manga or in the anime because I'm pretty sure that's gonna be hysterical.
Yeah, that's gonna be funny. Oh my god. Um, the other thing is like you also get you're getting now more of a backstory with Damien too. You realize that he's the reason he's such a his goal is to be the best, is to impress his dad, who doesn't seem to really care.
Yeah,
His dad, who's always drawn like this weird bug-eyed psycho.
Like he's the villain, you could tell him, just spot him in the room.
he's like if what's the guy who played the Igor guy in Frankenstein movies?
Oh, Dwight Fry.
No, was it the Dwight Fry? I was thinking about the other dude.
Bela Lugosi?
No, shoot.
No.
He's the guy who the way you did a stream recently, Mark, where you said the way
Oh, Peter Lorre.
Peter Lorre.
Oh,
He looks like Peter Lorre and Adolf Hitler had a kid. Like he's bug-eyed, but he has that crazy, like really cropped haircut at the top. But yeah, you don't see the guy too often, and when you do, he's a complete jerk.
yeah. You kind of understand where Damien is coming from with his own attitude because of that.
Yeah, and so they do a good job in terms of, I don't want to say making him a good guy, but making it where he's not the typical heel that Anya has to contend with. There's obviously going to be a childlike, not romance, but there's a childlike camaraderie that is going to probably transpire there.
Mhm. And then you have some other characters that get introduced, like Fiona Frost, Nightfall. I think that's her code name.
Oh yeah, is it the tennis partner?
Yes, the other spy who has it really bad for Twilight, and
Yeah.
she wants to get rid of Yor as his wife and replace her.
I was telling Mark that was my second favorite storyline was the whole tennis match episode, because again you're thinking to yourself like, okay, here's Twilight, he's supposed to be the best spy, but there should be other spies out there, and then you meet her, and then it turns out like she feels jilted because she was hoping that she was going to be like the wife that was going to be picked for the mission, and she wasn't. And part of you's thinking like, well, why? She's the most qualified, but then you realize like it just wouldn't be the same. The dynamic between the characters would be completely different.
And she lacks that like empathy like Yor has. As like you said, she does have that motherly figure where I don't think Fiona would have.
That's the interesting thing, is that Fiona is like a femme fatale. The way she's
Mhm.
drawn, the way she's depicted, the way she acts. And I think from an artistic point of view, they did a good job with Yor, because if you look at her facial structure, she looks like cute. She's
Mhm.
drawn essentially in the way a lot of like middle school girls are in the face. She has kind of these pie eyes. I mean, they're not like blue or purple or green. They're just kind of like a really dark hue. And then for her mouth, it's just like a V shape. So she doesn't have any of the facial qualities of a lot of femme fatales and spy movies. But you know that she can do her thing because of how she dresses, and obviously what she does in her job. Whereas in the case of Fiona, she sticks out like a sore thumb, because it's like, nah, she's definitely like a spy or an assassin in some way, shape, or form.
I love that tennis scene where they have the tennis pros coming up to to the match, and she looks at him and she says, "Have you played tennis before?" He goes, "No, not really." And they dabbled a little bit, and then when they start playing, they're kicking the pros' asses.
Yeah.
Like, dabbled, huh?
Yeah, dabbled.
I also like the bonus stories with what's his name? The Q
Frankie?
guy. Yeah,
Frankie,
Frankie,
yeah.
where he goes to Lloyd for relationship advice. Because this is like the last guy you should be going to for relationship advice.
Yeah.
He
That
wants
was a
to
good
impress
one.
this girl. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way it ended with you don't even see the date. He gets his advice from Lloyd, and he goes on his date and he comes back and he seems like he's really happy, and Lloyd's like, "Well, how did it go?" Because like Lloyd and Anya are getting ice cream or something, and Frank's just like, "Oh yeah, she said that she just wasn't ready for it yet, and she just needed time to find herself, that sort of thing. But she said I could look her up, anytime I wanted." And like, yeah, so I'd say that's a win. And Anya, who can she can read his mind of what he's really thinking, so she just like walks up to him and just kind of like pats him on the back. She's like, there.
Then he walks
Poor
away
guy.
slumped down.
Yeah.
I love when he made him babysit her.
Oh yeah, and they had little adventures together. They actually had some really good time to shine. Like it was him in that one story arc where they rented the castle, right? And they played
Mhm.
like the spy hero or something in real
Bond
life.
man, yeah.
Yeah, the Bond man.
Yeah, that was funny. And you could see like Lloyd going, "What do you mean you want a castle?"
Yeah. And I remember it harkened back to, again, in the first mission, she mentions it. It's like, well, we have to move. We can't live in that apartment anymore. She's like, "Can we live in a castle?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll see about that." So from a writing perspective, it was neat that they harkened back to something that was mentioned so early on.
Yeah, and I love when he first adopts her and he asks her like what kind of toy she wants, and she says like a gun with a sniper
Silencer.
silencer, and he's like, What did I say something that she might have overheard it or something?" And she's just smiling and I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I want."
She says, Papa is a bad liar.
I
He
know
lies
that,
all the time.
but he's a cool liar.
Yeah, but he's a cool liar.
Oh my god, what was that? Trying to think of that one part. I'm having like a brain fog now. Where what was like Yuri Izzy's they brought in that one guy that I think it was Twilight that defeated, and they caught him instead, and he was interrogating him. I'm trying to remember now.
I don't think I've gotten that one.
Oh, okay. I think it was right before he was supposed to go meet her new husband for the first time.
Oh, yeah, I know I read that one, but it's not coming to me. But yeah, it's right before Yuri goes over to their place for dinner. I think that's in volume 3.
Yeah, I was trying to like I thought that was like one of the ones Twilight defeated and they got him and they were trying to get information on Twilight through him. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I got the volume in front of me, but I'm just for some reason not finding it in here.
Mhm.
Maybe it was volume 2. I don't know.
I just want to also know, like, how does Lloyd pull off being a psychiatrist?
They don't explore that too much.
It's kind of interesting because I don't see him like giving out advice.
I mean, so it's not an actual job. Like, he doesn't actually go and
Oh, okay.
do that. Yeah, I think it's just a front. I don't think he has a practice anywhere. Unless I haven't gotten to volume 7 yet. So unless there's a story about that.
Yeah, no, I haven't read 7 yet. I know he goes in there and unless they were all employees of the actual the spy agency and they're all just pretending to be all these employees, but when he's bringing Anya in there and she suddenly gets up into the air vent.
Yeah, into the air vent. I think some of them are, if I'm not mistaken, but I think it's supposed to be a legitimate hospital or psychiatric place.
Okay.
I think.
And who is that one he's his point person who's always assigning him the jobs?
Oh, the lady, right, with the glasses. Yeah. forgot her name too.
I just love that part, like, when he gets the newspaper and even in the anime, and he's sitting on the train and he's reading what he has to do for this assignment, and he just kinda rips it apart and screams out loud, and everybody on the train looks at him.
So they animated that one scene really well. The part where it's a one-to-one adaptation
Mhm.
from the manga, and it's a part where he's reading it, and it's in a profile view, and he gets to the part where it's like, you need to have a child, and he just spits his coffee out at the page, but there's no change in his facial expression with the exception of his lips. Like his eyes still look droopy the way that they always do, and it's just that immediate reaction of like, what? Like, how stupid can it? Like, how am I gonna have a child in 7 days? It's I don't know, the comedic timing of that, the way that they chose to animate it was really good.
Right, it's like when he first gets Anya too, and he's trying to, like, let her know not to tell anybody, she just came into his life and when they meet the neighbors for the first time, she goes, "Oh, I've always been his kid for a very long time."
Yeah. I was looking through volume 1 before we went live, and I mean, whatever they cut, it was very minuscule. There was that part of me, again, like what Mark was talking about, where I wish there were certain scenes that they kept in. The scene in the orphanage in the manga, there's a few scenes in there where it's a lot funnier, where there's like a kid picking his nose and stuff. Like you can really tell that the place was fairly destitute.
Mhm.
But like I said, for people listening who maybe haven't seen the anime yet, anime is pretty accurate. I would say it's about 99.5, 99.9% true to what transpires in the actual manga. And in some cases, they extend it. They extend a scene past where it was in the original book itself.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see them do that first date in the anime.
Yeah, I went forward and looked at how Mission 2 starts, and I'm like, my gosh, like they are adapting one chapter for one episode of the anime. I'm guessing that's what they're gonna do based on the titles. But Mission 2 is the whole meeting with Yor. And in my head, for some reason, I thought that Mission 1 was just the introduction to Anya. I didn't realize that, nah, they literally go on a full adventure from beginning to end.
Oh, Gabe says, "Good evening, fellow kids. Lloyd never sees any patients. His blonde handler is desperately in love with him." Is she I thought it was, no. Is that one in love with him too?
I don't know if it's implied or not. I know that Fiona for sure is, but
Yes.
I'll have to reread and see about the handler. The only reason I say that is because in the recent chapters with the handler, if that is something that's implied, I did not see it recently, like really like touched upon in great detail. So he might be correct.
Mm. I
The
also wanna
recent
see
series. So I forgot to ask you, do you have the app to read the chapters ahead of time that come out every
I
week?
I do, I need to do it. I
Oh,
just
okay.
been mostly on the physicals, but yeah, I gotta do it.
Yeah, because right now they just got off the cruise ship, but the cruise ship arc is really good. I won't
Yeah,
spoil it for you guys.
I think 7 ends with them going on the cruise ship.
Yes, it does. And I'm pretty sure
Oh
that
god.
at least half of 8 is gonna be devoted to the cruise ship, because I know it took about 5 chapters of the in on Shonen Jump to get through that arc.
Oh my god, I can see all of them on a cruise ship.
With the exception of the dog. Unfortunately, the
Right.
dog stays home.
He's probably with Frankie.
Yeah, I think Frankie was watching him.
Because every time he's gotta go somewhere, that's who he dumps everybody on, Frankie.
Yeah.
What was the other thing? I think there's also something up with that Becky Blackwell. I feel
Who's
like
just
Oh
kind
my
of like,
gosh.
yeah, Anya's friend at school, so it seems like there's probably more to her.
Yeah.
Do you wanna do you want a spoiler, or do you want to leave it as a surprise?
If I haven't gotten to it yet, leave it as a surprise.
Okay. Yeah, there is something up with her, but it's pretty funny when you get to it.
Yeah, it's kinda like almost every time Anya makes an attempt with Damien, Becky shows up.
Well, I don't think it's that nefarious. I mean, that might be something, but it's another subplot that is addressed. They just finished it just like recently regarding her.
Okay. But she's a funny character too. It's like when Anya's like, "No, don't piss him off more." She's looking at her going, "He's a jerk. You don't want anything to do with him. Come, let's go sit over here."
Yeah.
And Lloyd's the teacher in disguise going, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
It is funny. And I think you also landed hit something when you said this is not like the other mangas that are out there right now. I have Sakamoto Days, the physical copy. I haven't read
Mhm.
it yet. But another one, but it's not really like Spy Family, but I think it's more similar to Sakamoto Days is The Way of the House Husband. Have you read that one?
Yes, I have 3 volumes of it. Very similar. Again, like it's this kind of parallel thinking where it seems like everyone is kind of thinking along the same trajectory, where it's this idea of let's take something that's action oriented and see how many slice of life elements we can insert into it. All I can say is that, and again, I think people's taste might vary, but there is a Netflix adaptation, and I hate it. It
Uh-huh.
is so
Yeah.
cheap. Like it is. When I found out they were gonna make one, I was super excited because I thought, man, the art is so good in this manga. I can't wait to see how they translate it. It's like South Park Flash animation, where they just have like the characters cut out and they just hop across the screen, and I couldn't stand it. Like after I watched one episode, I was like, "This sucks. I'm just gonna stick to reading the manga." But it's very good. I don't think that the two are immediately comparable, other than the fact that they both kind of revolve around this notion of um, people where there's some degree to which what you're expecting is not what you're getting.
Mhm.
But I think that Way of the House Husband, there is no through line to it. So in the
Mhm.
case of like Spy X Family, it's this idea of no, they need to infiltrate this place. They need to get closer to this minister, but they can't because he's a recluse and he pretty much only comes out for functions that regard the school. So you already know, like, okay, well, that's the direction that they're headed. You're going to see some evolution. Sakamoto Days, there's an evolution because it's this guy, he wants to run his 7-Eleven, but because of a turn of events, basically, like the organization that he's part of comes back into his life. With Way of the House Husband, it's like almost pure slice of life, where it's just episode after episode is just him basically using his yakuza skills to learn how to, I don't know, stir fry vegetables the right way
It's like or go to the community center with the girls and do yoga.
and do yoga. Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong, it's great, but I would recommend for people in the chat, don't watch the anime at all.
No.
It might turn you off from the manga. Go ahead and just read the manga.
It's kind of like that anime is like it almost reminds me of like when they have like the comic books where they're just like playing out the panels from a comic book. It doesn't almost sometimes feel like like action, like animated.
It looks like a motion comic. Yeah.
Yeah, like a motion comic.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
I thought it deserved a lot better, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I know I think I've heard rumors they're doing a live action one in Japan, but I'm not sure.
That would be better. That would be a lot
Yeah,
better. And they could do
I
it
would.
because I mean, pretty much all the action takes place in the neighborhood. There is not really any need for grandiose set design or anything like that. But that one is fantastic. Like I said, that one is on. Um, like I said, I think I'm on volume 3 or 4 already on that one. But that's a really good slice of life. It's very male oriented. So I know that we were talking about at lunch today how a lot of slice of life books and anime that we read and watch, they deal a lot with young girls, especially. But there are slice of life stories out there that deal with male protagonists, and I think Way of the House Husband, with the exception of his wife, pretty much has a predominantly all male cast in it.
Mhm. I think another one I like that has a male lead is Blue Period. Have you read that one?
What's that one about? I saw it at Barnes and Noble today, and I see it advertised, but I actually don't know what the story is about.
It's about this teenage boy. He kind of like is floating through life at school. He's very smart. He's like top of his class. He doesn't know what he wants to do, but his mother's kind of convinced him to get something that's going to be like secure and safe and he can make some money
Oh,
off
it's
of.
art, right?
Right. And then he accidentally like one day spots this painting in art class and becomes obsessed with becoming an artist, which goes against everything his mother was hoping for him to do.
It's every Asian parent. It's what they
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah, so he's like struggling because he finds this love like almost near the end of his high school life. So he's got to play catch up with everybody else so he can try to get into art school. And he's also dealing with making friends with everybody in his art class. And there's this one kid who's I don't know if it's transgender or cross dresses, that everybody knows he's really a male, but he likes to dress as a girl and he has hard time at home with his family, and they kind of bond over art. And there's a lot of like personal relationships that happen. It's actually really good.
There's one that's kind of similar to it thematically, but it's a comedy, and it's called "There's Something Wrong with This Art Club."
Mm.
I think it's a manga and then had an anime adaptation. I've only seen the latter, but again, it's kind of a slice of life story where we were talking about how a lot of these tales involve clubs that take place after school, and very little of it actually revolves around the club itself. It's all about the ways that they kind of skirt around it to get into hijinks and mischief and stuff like that. And that's essentially
Yeah.
the same, a very, very similar plot. There's one that not many people have known about, and I found out about it by accident, and then I got Mark to watch it, and it's called Asobi Asobase, and that one is hysterical. If people out there listening want something that's really good, like as far as comedy is concerned, and it plays more towards a Western audience than the tropes that are very typical of a lot of comedy that's in a lot of Asian storytelling, then I think they're gonna like that one a lot. It's literally about three girls, and they have a club that they attend after school, and it's just them goofing off. Mostly, it's them playing children's games, and kind of the results that happen after that.
Hmm. I have to see that one. I haven't heard about that one.
It's
It's
yeah,
really
it's on
funny, but it's also
Crunchyroll.
really mature.
Okay.
It's a PG-13
Yeah,
Okay.
type thing. Yeah.
not
Nothing
for
like
kids.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
say any. There's nothing like there's no nudity or anything like that, but they do make like some I guess blue humor jokes
Yeah, it's
language
like
wise.
I don't know, like Family Guy or South Park, kind of like it's TV 14, something like that. But a
Okay.
lot
I
of
have to check it
I've
out.
watched a lot of those slice of life shows recently about like high school girls are in a club after school, and like that's the premise. It's almost like isekai, where like just someone did it first and then everybody copied it. Uh, After school girls in a club is like its own genre, and like Tim said, a lot of them like the the premise of the club is almost immaterial. Like I finished K-On! uh, yesterday or the day before yesterday, and they only play in their band like I don't know, 5 or 6 times in the entire series, and most of the episodes are just them doing comedy stuff. Like there's an episode where one character, uh, she wants another character to hit her on the head, so she's just trying to come up with like little schemes to try and get the person to hit her on the head. That's the whole episode. Another one is just them getting groceries for their teacher who's homesick, and that's the whole episode. It has nothing to do with being in a band. But it's like we are talking about with Cowboy Bebop earlier, is that sometimes these stories, they don't have to move the plot forward as long as the characters are so likable and so funny and the material's good enough. It doesn't matter. You're having a good time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know, like, for some reason lately, they've been doing a lot of live action adaptations of manga and anime. Do you think Spy Family would work in live action?
Uh, so that's a weird one.
Mhm.
So far with like Netflix adaptations, they all suck. Like they're all terrible.
Yeah.
But I've seen how some of them are adapted in Japan, and the irony is that they try to get as accurate as they can. So even though like in your cast of anime characters you have blondes, brunettes, redheads, whatever, essentially they just take Japanese people and either put a wig on them or dye their hair, which I guess is okay. But it's the idea that it kind of shows why each medium has to stand on its own, and that you can't just wait for the adaptation, because even when you try for that like that 1-to-1 ratio, it just doesn't adapt, quite the same way. You can actually see the seams and the special effects, and they stand out very glaringly. Whereas if you look at a manga and how it's done, or an anime, everything blends together because it's all part
Mhm.
of the same world. Whereas if you see a guy, I don't know, jump out of a moving car, but you can tell it's a green screen, then obviously it takes you out. But props for not lack of trying, because I think that at least one thing that, and I think you've said this several times in several videos, but one thing that they do right whenever they do these types of adaptations is they do try to stick very diligently to the source material. So you do have that consistency throughout every single thing, whether it's live action, manga, or anime. So I do think that if they do it, I think it would still be better than anything that they would do from like a Netflix adaptation.
Oh god, like One Piece, I don't even want to see that.
The worst one was Death Note. I couldn't make it
Yes.
through. And the bad thing about it was their Ryuk was spot on. I mean, they got a really good CG maquette of Ryuk, and they got a good voice actor too, and Willem Dafoe. It's just everything else sucked about it. Like it
Yeah.
was just awful. You could tell the whole thing was just butchered by committee.
I think
Yeah,
one of the
it's. Oh, go on.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was probably going to change the subject if you're talking about Death Note. So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think one of the best live action adaptations, it's Japanese, is the Rurouni Kenshin movies.
No,
Oh, I haven't
I've
seen
never
those.
watched those because I've never been into Rurouni Kenshin or Samurai X. I think that's what they called it when it was on Toonami.
Yeah.
But I never got into it, so I never checked out those movies. But I've heard that they've all been reviewed really well, and people are saying that they're just legitimately good adaptations. Even if it's like Tim said, like they put a wig on him to make him look like the anime character, so it ostensibly looks goofy. Like the Full Metal Alchemist live action movie, where I did watch some of that, and that just looked so bad. Or those Attack on Titans live action movies where they just look so awful, I couldn't sit through them. But I have heard that Rurouni Kenshin was adapted really well.
Yeah, that was really good, but like you were bringing up like the Full Metal Alchemist and Attack on Titan. My brother's like a big fan of both of those, and he's kind of like, this is kind of like when you didn't need a Japanese cast. You could have
Yeah.
done this like this would have probably worked better maybe as a like a Hollywood movie if done right with the right people.
One thing that I can say that is live action that apparently is good is Boys Over Flowers. I haven't I
Yes.
haven't I haven't seen it, but my sister and my wife have both seen it. They didn't. I don't even think they knew that there was an anime.
Which version?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
There's a Japanese one, there's two
Korean?
Taiwanese ones, but the Korean one is actually my favorite.
That's the one because I remember that it was my wife. She was hooked onto K dramas for a while, and she liked that one. And I was like, oh, that's actually based off of a manga.
Yeah,
And
that was
she was like,
actually
yeah, that's
really
really
good.
good. The other one too is I don't know. I think a lot of the rom-com stuff tends to translate pretty well from what I've heard. I haven't seen any of the live actions.
I remember like in the early 2000s, I was really into The Wallflower,
Oh yeah,
and they had like a Japanese drama on that, and it wasn't too bad.
I was
Because it
telling
worked.
I was telling Mark about this one. Have you heard of that? It was the series, a mini series called The Kids on the Slope.
No.
So The Kids on the Slope is about. It takes place in 1965. It's the post World War II era Southern Japan, specifically like the Nagasaki era, and it involves basically two Catholic protagonists and
Oh.
an outsider, and it's a very interesting look at the time period. And I don't want to say it's deep because I don't know what that means. I mean, the deep could mean different things to different people, whether you're looking at philosophy or storytelling. But it's basically a metaphor for being an outsider because it involves like a guy he's a half breed, half Japanese, half American. He's an orphan, and he's Catholic, and his friend is Catholic too, and his whatchamacallit, and the person that they meet is this Japanese boy that they become friends with. But it's very good, and apparently they did make a live action one out of it. And my wife and I just finished that recently, and I just found out that they made a live action, and so I'm like, if that ever pops up on my radar, we're gonna have to see it and see the movie adaptation and see how it does compared to the anime.
Wolf 10 Media says Psychopaths would make a good live action.
I
I
don't know
never
what
watched
Psychopath is.
Psychopaths.
It's a sci-fi where they have a cop who's assigned these criminals. I guess they had minor offenses, and they're tasked with hunting down other criminals, and they use these special guns. Explaining it doesn't do it any justice.
I guess it's like explaining like Kill la Kill. I remember
Mhm.
I told Mark, I said, you need to watch Kill la Kill. What's it about? I can't tell you. If I told you, you might not even watch it because it sounds so like ridiculous on paper that it's one of those things that you just have to see it, and then if it's to your liking, great.
Yeah, and Psychopaths is really good. It's just like I said, explaining it makes it sound dull,
Yeah.
but then when you actually watch it, it's really actually good.
You say, I don't know if you've ever heard us talk about this, but that's the reason why I tend to pick my reading material based on title. And it's
Mhm.
like, basically, the more ludicrous the title is, the more likely it is I'm just going to read it because it sounds so far-fetched that it's like, is this literal? And 9 times out of 10, it is literal. Like, it is exactly what they say it's
I
about.
noticed that, like, a lot, especially with isekai, they have, like, really long titles, like the
Yeah.
hero who's from another realm who ends up in the world of the and you're like, "How did you fit this title on the cover?"
Yeah, exactly.
Another one here says, "What about Blade of the Immortal live action? What's your opinion on that one?"
I'm
I
not
didn't know
I
they
think
I'm
I've
made
seen
I'm
one
that.
not
yet.
that familiar with that.
Me
I'm
either.
surprised with that one. So, Tim, you watched the Battle Angel Alita movie. How was that? Everyone loved it, it seemed.
I would say, I mean, I'd say it's fairly accurate to um, the series, but I mean, there's some glaring, obvious differences. Visually, I think they did a good job,
Okay.
but they
I
do
know
they do
that.
things I find are really annoying. Like they do a lot of tropes that are what like you could tell they're Western tropes, like the love
Mhm.
interest, for example. And I don't know. I'll be completely honest. I know people like it. I was not impressed. I did not really want to watch it again after the first time.
Yeah, I think I only watched it once. I thought it was good, but, like, some of the CGI was getting
That's a
like, you
James
could tell.
Cameron thing, right? Where
Yeah.
he wants to use his technology, his precious special effects technology, and he just overburdens his movies with them now. They all just kind of it was the uncanny valley of the animation on her eyes that they wanted to make them look like the eyes from the manga because she had those big bug eyes. So they animated just the actress's eyes, and that turned me off, and is why I didn't see it. It looked like something out of Polar Express. It just looked really weird and bad.
Yeah, some
Yeah,
people said that they didn't mind it, and I guess overall I didn't, but I just thought, in my opinion, it was just too distracting.
yeah, it was. It was kinda like, what was it? The Speed Racer, live action adaptation, like,
I liked that one. As
yeah, but
far
it
as
was
Wachowskis go,
but with the special effects, there was something like it was kinda like
it
or
it was almost too much because they were trying to make it. They wanted to look like a retro 50s setting because that's when the manga and the anime came out. But they also wanted it to look like a Hot Wheels racetrack. So,
yes.
like, all of the racing is done on these like crazy CG loop de loop. Like it's supposed to look like Hot Wheels, and like, yeah, you made it look like that, but man, that's just overdoing it. But I did enjoy that movie. It was very unashamedly a kids movie. It got everything
Mhm.
from Speed Racer in there. I think some of the visuals, like all that CG, probably was unnecessary. But as far as like some of these live action adaptations go, Speed Racer is one of the better ones.
It is. And I was remember seeing it in the movie theater, my friend was kinda like, "I think I'm gonna have a seizure watching this
Yeah,
film."
I
It's,
mean,
like, way too much.
yeah, there just so much going on. It does like it seems like it's going to give you one of those like yeah Pokemon seizures or there's too much flashing. But I mean they
Uh,
would do stuff like straight out of the intro, when he jumps out of the car and it does like that 3D turn on him, like they took that right out of the cartoon and they put it in the movie and it ended up looking really cool. There's a couple live action Lupin the Third movies, one from the 70s and one from like 10 years ago. And I like the one from the 70s. I hated it the first time I saw it because I was only familiar with the anime, and the movie I think predates the anime, so it was actually an
mhm.
adaptation of the manga. And when I watched it again earlier this year with that context in place, it's actually a really good adaptation of the tone of the manga. It's just a really strange film because it's live action, but it tries to implement cartoon squash and stretch reactions and stuff to it. So like if a character gets a door slammed in their face, they'll be flattened against a wall, or if a bomb blows up in front of them, they'll have like soot all over their face. It's like when in Who Framed Roger Rabbit when Eddie Valiant goes to Toontown and he's in the elevator and it's like squashing him and stretching him in live action that just kind of looks like Drop Dead Fred or Beetlejuice. It kind of just looks really weird and gross.
It's like
But yeah.
go I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like, but then there's the one from 10 years ago, which was done by Ryuhei Kitamura, and a bad Lupin the Third movie, but a good Kitamura movie. And I feel the same way about Kitamura's Godzilla film, Godzilla Final Wars, which is just, it's a bad Godzilla movie, but it's a good Kitamura movie. It's almost like if you like Kitamura movies, then you're going to like his Lupin and his Godzilla movies. Like if you enjoyed Versus or movies like that. But if you're going into it because you want to watch a good Lupin the Third movie, you're probably going to absolutely hate it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Netflix Lupin show. I think it's from France.
Oh yeah, and they
But
have
they
Idris
change it.
Elba as
Yeah.
Lupin.
Yeah, it's not based off of Lupin the Third though. So it's based
No.
off of Arsène Lupin, the
Yeah.
literary character by Maurice Leblanc. So, but it is kind of slyly cashing in on the popularity of the Lupin name in modern times because of the manga, but it otherwise has no relation to it. So I never bothered watching it.
Did you ever watch the live action Jitama movies?
Gintama? No.
It's one of those where, like we were saying earlier, where Japan wants to make it as accurate as to the anime,
Yeah.
and they do all the crazy stuff in the anime, but it just looks weirder live action. Like they
Oh.
have the big duck walking around and the
You haven't gotten to the comment yet, but Wolf 10 Media just mentioned the live action Fist of the North Star movie, which I have seen, and I do
Oh,
like
yes.
that one. Everyone trashes the live action Fist of the North Star. But it's actually it's a pretty solid adaptation, at least of the plot and everything from Fist of the North Star. It's just so scaled down on a cheap budget. It's
80s cheese.
yeah,
I think it
80s
was.
cheese, but that's exactly what Fist of the North Star is. I mean, I actually picked up Volume 4 at Barnes and Noble today, and it is such a cheesy, gratuitous, over the top manga, and they give you a cheesy, gratuitous, over the top live action movie. If anything, it wasn't over the top enough because it didn't have enough gore. It should have been like a hard R, because when the heads explode, the camera cuts away. You don't get to see the brains going everywhere, and like
Right.
that's kind of what you want from live action Fist of the North Star. But all the plots there, the characters are there, everybody's where they're supposed to be and portrayed the way they're supposed to be. It's just done on like the same budget as that Canon Films Masters of the Universe movie from the 80s, where it's like, hey everybody, it's He-Man and Skeletor on Eternia for 5 minutes. And they go to Earth for the rest of the movie because we got to save money.
I know. It's I remember my dad was really big into like those B-rated action films, especially like the martial art ones, and he brought that home from the video store. I remember sitting there going, I think this is an anime.
Fist of the North Star. Yeah.
Yeah.
It man, so there was that weird time in the late 80s and early 90s when Hollywood was making a bunch of live action manga and anime films, but we just didn't know that's what they were at the time. So like they made those two Guyver movies. And I have
Mhm.
such a I don't know, I have such a love-hate relationship with those because the effects were done by Screaming Mad George, who did like the Reanimator movies, and that Guyver suit just looks perfect. It stepped straight out of the anime and the manga, and they adapt the storyline from like the first storyline from the anime. They adapt it really well. The whole fighting with Kronos and going to the corporation, fighting the Zoalord and all that. It's just that they add all these really annoying jokes, and they turn it into a goofy comedy, almost parody of the Guyver, and that's not what anybody wanted. Like you have JJ Walker from Good Times as a rapping Zoanoid mutant, and he even says dynamite, like his stupid Good Times catchphrase. It's so annoying. But then you get to the second one, and that's the one with oh darn it, what's his name? David Hayter was, so they recast the Guyver with David Hayter, and that one's really really good. They get rid of all the humor. It's got the correct tone. It's a hard sci-fi action movie. They adapt one of the better stories from the manga about the evil Guyver. It's done really well, but that one I think was made for TV, so the budget's really low. And the Guyver suit still looks fantastic, and the action's really good, but it's done on a much smaller scale than the first one. I kind of wish Guyver 2 had the budget of Guyver 1. But yeah, here we are.
Wasn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Mark Hamill in one of those?
Yeah, he was in the first one, and it's funny because he's not the Guyver in that movie. He's
No.
an original character who's like a detective with that mustache Mark Hamill insisted on having in the 90s in all of his movies that looks so stupid. He gets turned into a giant cockroach at the end of the movie, but all the promotional material, all the VHS covers and the posters always like put the Guyver's face on there and Mark Hamill's face next to it to try and trick you into thinking he's the main character. Yeah,
I had a
Dark Hero, the sequel, was great.
yeah. I had a classmate who only knew that first movie, and then when they saw like one of the animes, they're like, "Wait a minute, this is way better. What
So
happened with the
much better.
movie?" Oh my god, yeah. There's like a bunch. I also feel like there's a whole bunch of Hollywood movies that seemed inspired more by like anime and manga. I mean, even if you look at Avatar,
Oh yeah, like the last Airbender Avatar or the James Cameron Avatar.
the James Cameron.
Oh, okay. That one seemed more like inspired by the very basic sort of Last of the Mohi or Dances with Wolves kind of story. Like, oh, I'm a fish out of water. I'm gonna go and I'm from a advanced civilization, and I'm gonna go teach these savages a lesson. Oh no, wait, they're noble savages, and now I want to defend them. That kind of like Pocahontas sort of storyline. I don't know. I wasn't that impressed with Avatar outside the visuals.
That yeah, to me the visuals were the only thing that made that movie. I was
Yeah,
like story-wise it was boring. Speed Racer's effects were too loud. Yeah, that was probably the
yeah.
other thing. I remember sitting in the theater, it was like, wow.
It's yeah, it's like go back and watch the '90s Spawn movie with that CG cape he has, and it's just too much CG. Or if you're watching like one of the Star Wars prequels, the where like oh everything's normal until they go to a weird planet full of CG buildings and CG aliens and CG cars and CG everything, and it's like oh stop.
Yeah, it was like too much. I think like during that time period they were focusing way too much on CG because like when you go back to see the movies now, you're like, that looked horrible.
Yeah, yeah. CG, I don't know. The practical effects, they did hit a point where even when they're bad or cheesy, there's still an element to them that you can enjoy. I mean, I watch a lot of bad horror movies, so I'm probably biased. But with CG, it ages. It just always ages like milk, and
Mhm.
I don't find the same appeal in old, outdated CG effects that I do in old, outdated practical effects.
Sorry, Guyver 3, they adapted Guyver 3 in the sequel as a
Oh,
Guyver
okay, yeah.
Saga.
So they had this weird thing where they kind of screwed up in the movies. So there in the manga, there's Guyver one, who's the main Guyver, the good guy, and then a bad guy named Lisker got a broken control metal unit, and he became Guyver two. And he was only in one episode of the original anime OVAs, and then the reboot they put him in a bunch of episodes. But he dies, and then there's another Guyver called Guyver three, who's in the manga and the anime, who's kind of
Mm.
like an anti-hero Guyver. He's a good guy, bad guy, like he's doing his own thing. The the movies they took the character of Lisker and they put him in Guyver one, but he didn't turn into a Guyver. He was just like the boss Zoanoid who gets killed. So in Guyver two, they brought in the idea of the evil Guyver, but they had to create a separate character for it. It's all just stupid.
Low Pro says the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle puppet suits still look great. Compared to the newer movie, yeah, I think I'd rather have the older movie.
Oh yeah, I mean those were Jim Henson effects at their finest. I mean, I remember as a
Mhm.
kid, I never questioned like the turtles not being real. When I watched those movies, at least the first two, the good ones, I was like, those are the turtles. They're alive. They're real. They're on the screen, and they sold it completely. Except for that one weird scene where Donatello is laughing and you can see the actor's mouth inside of his turtle mouth. It looks creepy like an alien.
It's uh, yeah, like, at least with the newer ones with all the CG, they didn't really look like the turtles from the comics.
No, and they've already I mean, those movies, I guess, are like 7 years old now, and that CG has already aged rather badly, and they all just looked ugly. There's that weird thing, it's Paramount as a studio specifically. When they do these adaptations, they want their versions to stand out, and their idea is just always to make them look ugly. So, like, when they did those live action Transformers movies, and all the Transformers just, like, look asymmetrical and nasty, and then they do those Ninja Turtle movies, and the turtles all like look like yeah they've been living in a sewer because like they have weird brown stains all over their bandanas and stuff, and they all look like just covered in warts and gross. They look
Yeah.
like Shrek. And then they were
Mm.
gonna do that with Sonic the Hedgehog, that first trailer that everybody like mocked, where Sonic looked like some sort of monstrous troll thing, and that got such a negative reaction. They went back and they changed Sonic's design to look more like the video game and the cartoon. And then Sonic was a huge hit. The second movie just came out, and actually was gonna go see that this weekend. But yeah, it's just a weird Paramount thing where their idea was just to make everything really ugly until they went too far.
Yeah, I think speaking of like anime adapted movies, I think one of the worst ones I saw, and wasn't even really familiar with the original, was the Dragon Ball movie.
Ooh, Dragon Ball Evolution. Yeah. Yeah, that's like notorious. It was written during the Hollywood writers strike, so they just kind of had to like pump out what they could before the license lapsed because they had like procured that license back in 1998. Fox did, and then they just sat on it for too long, and they had to make a movie quick. And it's bad. When I tried to watch it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it like the Super Mario Brothers movie, where you're not
Yeah,
watching it to be a good adaptation. You're just trying to like pick out like what weird mutation of the source materials in there. But even then, it's just so bad, so cheaply made, so poorly acted. I mean, at least like Super
poorly
Mario
cast.
Brothers is, yeah, the cast is awful. I couldn't find anything good about it. I mean, at least even ironically, I couldn't find anything enjoyable about it. I'd rather watch one of those weird live action Taiwanese Dragon Ball movies from the 80s, you know. I've watched a couple
Yeah,
of those and those are at least funny ironically.
and I think what was funny was like I think that was the only other movie outside The Last Jedi my brother was fuming in the movie theater at. He was
Yeah,
just
I'd
like,
be mad too, but also I don't know. When you look at the trailer, when you look at the production materials, you had to know going in that it wasn't going to be a good Dragon Ball movie. I mean, I don't know who could have been fooled by by that to think they're going to get a good adaptation.
I think it was just like denial. It's like
Yeah.
maybe they know what they're doing.
Oh, man, I
And
watched it
I
on
didn't know anything
HBO.
about it.
Yeah, I mean it's weird too, is that you can tell where they picked and shoot they. It's this weird Frankenstein monster of a movie where they picked elements from these different storylines all over the manga, the 3,000 chapter manga, and they just tried to like combine it all into one narrative, and they chose it from the weirdest places, like all this stuff with like Goku being a kid in an American high school who has a crush on Chi Chi, but he doesn't know how to tell her, like all that stuff. Like they kind of took that from the Great Saiyaman arc with Gohan being in high school as a really short arc, and like the popular girl was Videl, and they kind of took that in there, and Gohan has to keep his superpowers a secret, and so same thing with Goku is he's got his powers, but he's got to keep them secret. They kind of took that. They kind of took the first arc where Goku goes around with Bulma and meets all the characters like Yamcha and everybody, but then they also added in like the King Piccolo arc where he's a bad guy, and he's got Pilaf's henchmen working for him like May. It's just a weird Frankenstein monster of a adaptation, and just everything's bad about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't even know much about Dragon Ball when I went to see that with my brother, and I even was like, "This is a horrible movie."
Well, you didn't know anything about Dragon Ball before you saw it, and you didn't know anything after you saw it, I can assure you.
I know. I just started reading. I just finished like the first Dragon Ball box set, and I'm getting into Dragon Ball Z now. But I'm like, yeah, the manga is so much better.
It's so much leaner than the anime, which is like notorious for having so much filler. But when you read the manga, it's just all the good parts and the narrative distilled. You know, if you're going from the anime to the manga, and it flows really well. With even the original Dragon Ball before you get into Z, it it has a pacing of its arcs where it starts with a Dragon Ball Hunt arc, and then like a martial arts tournament arc, then a Dragon Ball Hunt, then a tournament, then a Dragon Ball Hunt, then a tournament. You know, it's very
Mhm.
rigid in the way it paces its arcs, but Toriyama's art style is so kinetic and fluid. The characters are all fun, even when they're doing the same joke over and over again, like "Oh, Master Roshi's a pervert" for the 10,000th time, ha ha ha. Like yeah, but somehow it's still charming and amusing.
Now, speaking of manga, you guys are behind Kamen America, and there's a lot of I see a lot of manga inspiration in there. Would you say that?
I think aesthetically, it's definitely inspired by um, Eastern artistic styles, but storytelling
Mhm.
wise, it definitely is the work of two Americans. I I think Mark would have to probably opine more on that because he's the writer in terms of where he gets it from. I know that one thing we don't want to do is that right now in a lot of Western storylines, they're very decompressed, And the argument could be made that manga is decompressed, but it's okay in manga because you can have more pages to tell a decompressed story, so that by the time you're done reading a digest, you actually feel like you're very fulfilled in terms of what you've gotten. Whereas in a lot of Western comics, you're paying $5 for a book, but the decompression is so bad that you actually don't walk away really getting much of anything. But like I said, I'm just the artist. Mark is the writer, so he can actually, we can talk a little bit about that, and we can talk briefly about the Kamen America manga, because that's a process that we're currently going through right now too.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so with manga, and at least with the way we've been doing comics, is we put out two 59-page volumes of Kamen America a year. Then we also have Black Ops, which takes place in the same universe, and so there's some crossover in that. But as far as Kamen America goes, it's 2 volumes a year. So we can't have a volume where it's just the characters playing volleyball. If someone buys that and like that's all they get for 6 months, they're going to feel like, oh, that didn't move the story along at all. Yeah, it was fun, but it didn't go anywhere. Uh, Whereas manga is done in that like Shonen Jump style, where it's like you get a new chapter like every month, or not even every month, every like 2 weeks, I think is when Shonen Jump comes out. So you're always getting new material constantly. So if they want to do an episode or an issue where Anya just plays dodgeball at school, they can do that. That's just 1 week of your time. We don't have that luxury. We've found certain avenues around it. So the main Common America series that we do our pre-orders on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, that one moves the story along and develops the narrative, and it has moments in there for character work and just for fun. But if people want to see like the slice of life stuff, just the characters goofing around and having fun, we have Common America, the webcomic, which updates on Webtoons every Wednesday. And that's just a place for us to do any weird, fun little story with our characters that we want to do. It does recap the important narrative moments from the main series, but even we do that to make it all new material for the Webtoons readers. So we recap those moments from another character's point of view. So you're getting a new perspective on events you might have read before in the main series, but you're still getting new material out of it. So the Webtoon allows us to just do those sorts of funny slice of life decompressed things that we can't necessarily do in the main series because we have to move the story forward. But then we've got Common America the manga coming
And the
out.
two for Kamen America the manga, there's 2 studios who are working on it. One is a creative studio, and one is the artistic side. But the hardest part about that is in terms of story direction, learning to decompress and have it in that manga size. I don't know. Again, I might be speaking for Mark, but I think that was a little bit difficult, because I know that from the first pitch, it was like, no, like it kind of still feels stilted. There's a cadence and flow to it that one thing is that we like words is kind of what it boils down to. And typically in a 64-page book of Common America, there's a lot we're trying to cram in there. But I'm the letterer, and that means that I have to cut a lot of dialogue out. There's just way too much exposition. And even when we're looking at the manga, there's exposition that we have to cut out too, because it's like, no, it's a show don't tell thing. I was listening to some people commenting on manga in general, and they said that it's actually pretty rare that you find anything quote worthy in manga, because typically the dialogue only exists to move the plot along. They're not there to wax poetic on anything. And so I think that there is that curve that is having to be overcome with regards to its production.
Yeah, I mean, so it is funny when you're reading manga is that it either drizzles or it pours when it comes to dialogue, or the dialogue is just really, really sparse, or it's an info dump where you turn the page and it's a character explaining thermodynamics in this huge like word balloon that takes up half the page. It's kind of like either a little or a lot. Whereas like when we do dialogue in our comics, it's still, I'm always trimming it, and then Tim is trimming it even more. It always ends up being too much no matter how much I trim it. But it's more like a consistent amount of dialogue across each page, and unteaching myself to do that sometimes is difficult. I script out a page, and the way I script is that I do all the panel breakdowns, and then normally I put in the dialogue and the sound effects that go with each panel. And sometimes I just have to look at at my script and say, like, does it need dialogue? Does it need any text? Or are the visuals enough? Do the characters really need to be talking while they're fighting or talking while they're doing this? Like, do I need to have a caption to explain this establishing shot when just the arts of the establishing shot should be good enough? And having to stop doing that, it's a hard habit to break as a writer, but I think I've been getting better at it anyway.
And a question I think a lot of people who are fans of the Kamen America series want to know: you guys ever going to get maybe like an anime adaptation?
The only thing I can say about that is I have told Mark and my wife that in case I die, that they are not to sell any of our rights to Netflix.
No,
So the
no.
only time that would ever happen is if it was a legitimate studio from Japan that is willing to work with us to do it. Other than that, we're fine without an adaptation. But if it were to present itself, that would be a stipulation. We're very much in this position where we want the vision and the storyline to remain unadulterated. In fact, we actually have a law or a rule amongst ourselves, which is there are no alternate universes in the Kamen America universe. Everything that we approve is canon to the storyline with no derivations whatsoever. We actually had a creator who we actually like and we're friends with, and they wanted to feature her in his storyline. And it's like, oh yeah, in my storyline, she's a corporal, like in the army. I was like, nope, can't do that because there are no alternate storylines. It's either you're in the universe or you're not. And our universe is big enough where a lot of things can happen. I mean, there's some people who really get into the weeds with it. We were actually listening to some of our critiques from our previous volume, the one that's being released here probably in the next week, but digital went out last week. And some people were saying like, well, I don't understand it because so why even have a secret identity when her identity is public? Like, why even wear a mask when that's something known? Oh, like how come there's all these heroes running around and that's not addressed? Well, part of that comes from the tokusatsu genre, where a lot of times that doesn't matter. It's just understood that you live in this world that's fantastical and that you have kind of colorful people running around and everyone just kind of treats it as if it's part of life. So in that sense, it's like, now we have enough leeway in our world where other people can coexist in it and it would still make sense. I mean, for example, we have Soul Finder coming up here as part of our summer crossover. It's canon to our story, but you don't see Soul Finder ever referencing superheroes in their universe. That's fine. His world might not have enough room for us, but our world has enough room for him. So I do not trust any. I think just after years of kind of the philosophy of storytelling and whatnot, I actually do think part of what has affected negatively storytelling in the Western comics media is the existence of a multiverse, because I think it actually waters down the prime character. And we don't want that to happen. There are no alternate versions of Kamen America out there. There's not some bizarro version of her or some other version where there's like a gender swap or a race swap. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but that just doesn't happen in our world. And I just don't trust American companies to do it justice. I do trust the Japanese because they tend to high fidelity to their core storyline.
I mean, we just saw the first episode of the Spy X Family anime, and it was a like 1-to-1 recreation of the manga chapter. They were very, very strict with it because they do have, when they do adaptations, their philosophy, I think, is that we need to we are custodians of somebody else's property. We need to take good care of it and show reverence for it and treat it right. And that's the attitude they go into when they make their adaptations, whether it's adapting a manga into an anime or whatever. Whereas a lot of like Netflix, a lot of American studios, their attitude is more like, all right, we've got this property. We don't really know what to do with it. So we don't really understand it. But the IP and brand name seems to make a lot of money. So let's just do our own thing with it and make it our version. And they end up with something really bad because they don't have any understanding or particular care for the IP that they've managed to license. That's just one of the reasons why we wouldn't trust Netflix or an American studio.
It's like you got DC with the Omniverse where everything's canon. It makes no sense. Master J says one storyline, keeping things simple.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a linear storyline. It's bookended. We know how the story ends. So ultimately what what happens is whether it's volume 20, volume 30, volume 40, we know ultimately where it ends, like at least like the last 8 pages of how everything concludes. And that makes it easier. I mean, you hear people all the time complaining about what is it that makes it ideal. And I actually tuned in a little bit this morning. Y'all were talking about it. We're actually at Barnes and Noble. Just look at the 2 sections. In most Barnes and Noble, it's actually kind of funny because it's manga versus graphic novels. They tend to be in an aisle just separate from each other, and it's complete chaos. When you ask someone, well, how do I start reading? Name your favorite title here. I mean, what do you want? Do you want pre-crisis, post-crisis, New 52, Rebirth? Take your pick. You go over to manga, and it's like volume 1, go all the way down the line, and just start from there. And that's how we like it too. Even I heard someone this morning say on the channel, they were like, well, what about like crossovers? That's where things get messy. It's like, no, we even correct for that too. Black Ops, the recent 3 volumes, last year's, this year's, and next year's, they're all Black Ops books. They just happen to be crossover books too. You don't have to read them to know what's going on in Kamen America. We write these stories to be individualized enough that you're able to get the whole story just by following one series on its own. You just get a fuller picture if you're able to keep up with both. And I think that is, we talked about it before, so some of your viewers might be sick of us saying it, but we like to think of ourselves as having a tribrid model, not a hybrid model. Our art style is inspired by Eastern aesthetics. Our storytelling is definitely Western, and our presentation is European. So the way that we deliver the books and the way that we do it on a sort of periodic level is done in the European style of the way they do bande dessinée. And like I said, it works for us. We like it. It works with our schedule and what we do. And for people listening out there who might be readers, we do appreciate all of you because, again, it was like a gamble that we took, but we're having a lot of fun, and it seems like our readers seem to be enjoying it too.
And I do enjoy Kamen America a lot, and I do appreciate you guys for coming on the show today, and I was just wondering, what else do you guys have in store for us with the Kamen America universe?
So people can buy our books on Amazon and obviously on Kickstarter, Indiegogo when they go on first run. They can keep up with the webtoon, which is every Wednesday at between 9 and 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, and that's free to read, so there's no paywall or anything like that. Those are supplemental stories. They're not reissues of the comic, so they're actually side stories. And then you have the Kamen America manga, which should be coming out either late in the fall or early in the spring. And that one is going to be a fairly major announcement once we actually have all the pages complete and announce the publisher and everything like that. So that's one of those things that I don't think people will be able to miss. We are trying to negotiate right now. Actually, we're fairly certain that we're going to have it in retail stores. So hopefully you will be able to get it on the shelves in your local Barnes & Noble in the manga section. We're keeping pretty tight-lipped as to other details about it, but that's primarily what we're focused on. If people are interested in anything else Kamen America related, we are working on new merchandise that I think people will really love. I showed a photo today of the statue prototype that's actually in mass production. So I shared that this morning, and I think that is going to be for the fall campaign, and it's going to be 250 pieces. And so people who were kind of upset the last time that we had a high-end statue that we were selling for like 600, this one we're actually mass producing by a fair quantity, and it's going to be obviously a lot cheaper in price, but it is going to be first come, first serve. So we have a lot of things planned as far as this universe is concerned.
And I know you can't give out too much info on the manga, but is that also going to be a Kickstarter, Indiegogo?
We are contemplating that. We actually have 2 options. We can actually go straight to retail, or we can do a crowdfunded version. My experience is looking at other mangas that have gone on Indiegogo and Kickstarter. They actually have kind of underperformed what I thought that they would make. However, I think if we put it out as part of the Kamen America world in terms of branding, I think we might have some degree of success. Either way, it is, if we do it as part of crowdfunding, it would just basically to recuperate some of the costs that we have for its production, not necessarily to get it into people's hands. We do have quite a few options as far as publication. So that's the thing that we're deliberating right now. And honestly, it's going to be based on the company that we're working with. It's going to be based on the first right of rejection in terms of how they want us to proceed with it.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I love the Kamen America series, and I again appreciate you guys coming on to talk about Spy Family. And I know you're really busy, but maybe in the future we can get back together since the anime just premiered and maybe do more of a comparison between the manga and the anime if you're up for it.
I think so too. Maybe at the halfway point, like 6 episodes from now, we'll come back and have a retrospective and see where things have gone. I think that would be a lot of fun. And I hope for your listeners out there, I know that for your Saturday streams where we talk about manga, anime is great, but if you really want something that's wholesome, that has kind of a lot of genres that you can be interested in, I highly recommend Spy Family. It is the #1 thing on my reading list right now as far as something I never miss. I always catch every single update on Shonen Jump once it comes out. So I hope that you like this recommendation, and I hope that if people ask you where you found out about it, make sure to point out this channel.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And if you guys want to follow Tim and Mark, I have some information down below in the description. Again, thank you so much for coming on to the show, guys, and I hope to see you again. And good luck with Kamen America.
Oh, thank
Absolutely. Have a good night, everyone, and have a good weekend.
All right, good night, everybody. See you next Saturday.
Bye.
you. Oh.